Thank you all the group members for taking out time to attend today's session. I'm sure the presentation will be helpful to you and will help you in taking informed decision related to taxes. These will be the topics we will be covering today. We will have some taxation basics, then we'll discuss some points on capital gain, then we'll discuss RRSP, TFSA, and then we'll take some questions from the group members. So moving further, in this slide, basically I have explained how your taxable income is determined and how your total taxes are determined. So on the top hand side, you can see that there are various circles. So each component is made up of your income from each head. So it starts with your employment income, which is purely your salary income. Then you need to add your business income and losses. Then comes your property income and loss. So within property income, it covers your rent, interest, dividend, and royalty. Plus, you need to add half of your capital gain net of capital losses. So this is very important. So if you have a capital gain of, let's say, 5,000, then the income which would be included in taxable income would be half of it. So it would be $2,500. Plus, you need to add the other income, which will cover your RRSP withdrawals, pension income, and annuity income. So you can see that if you withdraw any money from your RRSP account, it would be included in your other income. And then,
Sorry, Pratik, one question. Can we ask you if we have a particular question related to this? Can we ask straight away or at the end of the presentation?
yeah, so basically I have covered 4 topics. So first we will
Mhm.
complete taxation basics, so which will cover 3 slides. So if you have any question related to taxation, you can ask at the end of the third slide. And then we will move on to the next topic. So you can
Okay,
ask
perfect.
question at any point in time.
Like for example, I have a question here in this particular slide, that when you
Yeah,
are
please
saying
go
the
ahead.
percentage of capital gain net of capital losses. For
Correct.
example, if you give the example of 5,000, so 5,000 net after the loss or before the loss, or we will deduct it 2,500 and then the
Yeah,
loss will be deducted and then.
yeah. So let's take an example. For example, on share X, you have a gain of $3,000, and on share Y, you have a loss of $1,000. So your net capital gain would be $2,000, and the amount which would be included in the taxable income would be $1,000.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
Yeah. So it would be net of.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. So after other income, then there are certain deductions which you can claim in your net income. Example would be RRSP contribution, childcare expenses, and the moving expense. So let's say you have a total income of $80,000, and if you are making an RRSP contribution of $15,000, so that will outright reduce your taxable income by $15,000. So your net income would be $65,000. Similarly, you can also claim the childcare expenses. And if you are moving from one place to another for the employment purpose, then you can claim moving expenses as well. So these are some of the examples of other deductions. There are other items as well, but these 3 items are generally applicable to majority of individuals. So basically, this is how your taxable income is determined. Once you have your taxable income in place, then you need to apply the tax rate. So now I'm on the bottom part of the screen. So once you have your taxable income, you need to apply the tax rate, which will give you the federal tax before credit. Then obviously you can have certain tax credits which you can use, which will minimize your tax, which will give you basic federal tax. You need to add your provincial tax, and that's how your total taxes are determined. So this is all about the taxable income and the total tax. So any question on the first slide?
No, good.
Okay, let's move on the second slide. So in this slide, I have assumed that the taxpayer is a resident in Ontario, and this is how the tax bracket looks like. So you can see that the first slab, your tax rate would be 20%, and it goes all the way to 52%. So if you are earning more than $214,000 in Ontario, your marginal tax rate would be 51.97%. So let's take an example. If I have an income of $48,740, I'm repeating again, 48,740, then my tax would be on first 44,740. I need to pay tax of 20%, 20.05%. And on remaining 4,000, my tax would be 24.15%. So this is how your federal and Ontario taxes are determined. you can see that after 89,000, it goes to 33%, then 37%, so forth and so on. So this is just the basic understanding of how the federal and the provincial taxes work. If you are resident of British Columbia, if you are resident of Alberta, then the tax rate will change accordingly on the basis of the taxes applicable in that particular province.
Pratik, one quick question. So you mentioned about 20.0.5. So that is total federal plus provincial
Correct.
taxes, or it's a separate and top of, or it should be the top of it provincial applied?
No, so these are the combined tax rate.
Combined tax. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay. So let me take you back to the first slide. So in the bottom part, I have in the green circle tax credit. So in the third slide, we will be discussing some of the tax credits which you should aware about and which you should claim at the time of filing your taxes. So the first is basic personal amount, which is of $13,229 for 2020. So this credit is available to all individuals, regardless of your age or income. So ideally, if your total income for an year is below 13,229, then you don't have to pay any taxes. The next is Canada employment amount. So basically, this is available only to the employee of Canadian resident. So the amount is $1,222. Next is home buyers amount, a very important one. So for example, if in any year you have purchased a first time, so if in any year you are a first time home buyer and you are purchasing a qualifying home, then you can take a tax credit of $5,000. I'm sure many of the group members will buy a new home in future, so you should be mindful about this particular tax credit. The next one is the tuition fee. So if in Canada, you have enrolled into any post-secondary education and if you are paying a fee to that particular institution, then you can claim a credit for this particular tuition fee. And the next is medical expenses. So of course, there are other lists as well within the tax credit, but these are the general one, which is applicable to most of the individuals. So any questions in tax credit?
No, it's clear.
Okay, perfect. One point which I would like to highlight is, so let's take an example of home buyers amount. The available credit is $5,000. So the point here to note is that your taxes will not be reduced by 5,000, but your amount of tax credit which you will be getting would be 15% of each amount. So if you are claiming home buyers amount of $5,000, then your taxes will go down by $750, which is 15% of each tax credit.
Just a quick question. If we don't able to claim during the 2019, is it possible to carry forward next year?
No, so these are non-refundable tax credit.
Okay.
So in any particular year, if you cannot claim it, you cannot carry it forward.
Got it. Thank you.
I think most probably what Ankit was wanting to ask you is that if he has bought a home in 2019 and not taken his benefit, can he take the benefit now? Am I right, Ankit?
Yeah.
So my ideal answer would be he can revise the tax return of 2019 at any point in time. So that would be the better way.
Okay, understood. Yeah.
Yeah, rather than claiming it in 2020, I would go for revising the 2019 return.
Got it. Yeah.
Okay. So this is all about the taxation. So let's move to the capital gain now. So in this slide, I have covered some of the interesting topics about capital gain. So in the first, the point is how capital gain and loss is determined. So first, you need to take the sale proceed of the shares which you have sold. You need to remove your adjusted cost base. So what is the adjusted cost base? So basically, it's your purchase price of shares plus any commission or any other fees which you have paid at the time of purchase. And then you need to remove the expenses associated with the selling of stock. So this is how your capital gain or loss is determined. Now, the amount which you need to include in your taxable income would be 50% of your capital gain or loss.
One question, Pratik.
Yes.
So for capital gain or loss, if the stocks were part of RRSP or TFSA,
correct,
you still have to count the gain and loss, or that is excluded?
If you can wait for some time, then we can discuss this topic in detail into RRSP and TFSA. So I have covered all the topics, but it would be good if we can discuss in that particular session, if you
Sounds
don't
good.
mind.
No worries.
Okay, perfect. So again, the taxable.
Pradeep, one more second. That means the capital gain oblique loss is proceeds of disposition minus adjusted cost base minus expense of disposition.
Correct.
Expense of disposition would be taxes and brokerage expenses?
Yes. So any expense.
Or would it be anything else apart from this?
No. So it covers only expenses which you need to incur compulsorily for the purpose of selling the stock. So just
that would be brokerage only.
Yes. So basically, without paying a commission, you cannot.
Yes.
So commission would be expense of disposition.
All right. Fine.
Do you have any other expense in mind? We can definitely discuss that as well.
I was looking at office expenses if I'm using this as a trading income.
Yeah. Yes. So yes. So in next slide, I have discussed those as well. Like if you are considering your capital income, then what are the things which you can be careful about? So we have more in next slides. We will be covering that as well.
Lovely. Sorry for interrupting you.
Okay, no problem. Okay, so moving on to the third pointer. So capital gains and losses can be realized by any individuals, corporations, partnership, or trust. Now what does that mean? It means individuals, corporations, partnership, or trust can either purchase or sell the shares. It's not only restricted to individuals. Even the other entities can also purchase and sell the stocks. Obviously, the tax treatment would be different for individual and for corporation, but there is no restriction on who can purchase or who can sell the stocks. Moving further, so if you have a capital gain from one stock and if you have a capital loss from another stock, so the loss which you are incurring, you can set off only against capital gain. You cannot set off your capital loss against your other income, which is like salary income or business income or any other property income. So capital losses has to be compulsorily offset against capital gains. Now, if in a particular year, you cannot completely offset your capital loss, then you can either offset that particular loss back 3 years, or you can carry forward it indefinitely. But even in future period, it has to be set off compulsorily against the capital gain. Sorry,
go ahead. By the last statement is, if I have a capital loss in 2019,
correct,
or 2020, I can go back and rectify my returns the last 3 years and adjust my losses over there.
Yes. So the point here is, so your point is right, but you don't need to amend your return. What you need to do, so there is a separate form called T1A. So you need to fill out that particular form and you need to send it to the CRA. So once CRA has that particular form, CRA itself will determine the taxes payable or refund due for the past year, and they will adjust accordingly. So it's a very easy process. No need to amend the return. Just fill out a particular form and send it to the CRA. That's it.
All right.
Any further question on the first slide of capital gain?
No.
Okay. So now this is the very hot topic. So our investment gains and losses would be treated as capital or income. So for most of the taxpayers, it would be treated as a capital gains and losses. But for day traders, it would be treated as business income and not the capital gains and losses. So obviously then question arises, how would I determine whether I am a normal taxpayer or whether I am a day trader? So I have listed down 6 factors. On the basis of these 6 factors, you need to judge whether you would be considered as a day trader or whether you would be considered as a normal taxpayer. Again, you need to look all the factors together. A single factor in isolation cannot determine your status. So let's first go by one the 6 factors. First, significant buying and selling of securities. If in your personal trading account, if you have a very high turnover of securities, then you may be considered by CRA as a day trader. Second, short period of ownership. So if you are buying a particular security and if you are selling it in a near future without waiting for the dividend income or other income, then it would be treated as a short period of ownership, and your income gains and losses would be considered as a business income. Third, very important one, if your security transaction is a normal part of your ordinary business, then for sure it would be considered as a business income. Fourth, significant time you are spending on the market study and research to identify which securities I should purchase. So again, this will lead to the classification as a business income. Fifth, if you're purchasing security with margin or with debt, it may lead to the classification as business income. And the sixth one is the speculative stocks. If you are purchasing a speculative stock, then the treatment would be the business income. Now let's take an example. If I am doing a high turnover in securities, but if I'm not spending too much time on market study and research, then it may not be treated as a business income. So multiple factors need to be considered for the purpose of determination of status, and you cannot judge on the basis of a single factor. And I'm sure, I know these are very qualitative factors, and CRA will take into consideration the situation of each individual for the purpose of determination.
So Pratik.
Yes.
Yeah. So isn't we need to prove that we are spending significant time on market study and research?
So I would say, so there has to be some results to prove that you are a day trader. So let's take an example. If your total income for a year is, let's say, $80,000, and out of which, if you are making a $60,000 as a capital gain and 20,000 maybe as a salary income or through other sources, then there is a concrete proof that the capital gains and losses is your business income. So one of the factor would be the proportion of the capital gains and losses versus your total income.
Okay, nice. Thank you.
One question here.
Sure.
How do you define the significant buying and selling of securities? What is the criteria?
Yeah. So for example, if in a particular day I'm placing 100 trades, 150 trades, then yes, it would be significant buying and selling of securities. So as I said earlier, so these are very qualitative factors. So one of the criteria would be to determine your total gains and losses from capital gain versus total income. That would play a very big role in the determination of status.
Pratik, for example, if you give the example of I'm, as a salary, I'm getting around 40, and my capital gain will be around 100,000. Let's suppose we invest one particular stock in Nasdaq, and Nasdaq, you know how it moves. So,
Correct.
for example, if a particular stock move 100 and 200%, then how it will impact, as a day trader, or how CRA will consider it as a capital gain or business income?
No, so in my opinion, it would be capital gain, because you are not acting like a day trader in this particular situation.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, what you have done, you have buy some stocks and it has increased in value, which is giving you a higher capital gain.
So I think only Vivek sir is buying significant securities. Rest all we are buying 100,000 share, 2,000.
I'm also buying insignificant account. But Pratik, I have a question.
Yeah, sure.
I have a question, Pratik. Now, though I'm currently not in Canada, I'm in India, but I have this question. Assumingly, I'm an incorporated person.
Okay.
All right. Now, I have a salary income coming in.
Correct.
Of an X amount.
Okay.
And I have trading income generated as an incorporated person of an X amount also. So I have an X plus X value.
Okay.
What will you consider me?
Sorry, actually, I didn't get your questions completely. So, for example, you have incorporated, right? Now,
I have incorporated myself.
Okay. And then you
right
are paying.
now, I'm already working somewhere, and I'm getting a salary of, let's say, an X value.
So, is salary through different employment?
Yes, of course. Salary is through a registered company in Canada.
Oh, okay.
Right. So let's say for any significant purpose, it is an X value. Okay. Value of your choice.
Okay.
I have incorporated myself. I am taking a business trading income also of an X value.
So it's in your incorporate account or your personal account?
It is in my personal trading account.
Okay.
On Wealthsimple, I have TFSA, I have RR, as well as I have a personal trading.
Okay.
Now in all three put together, I'm getting a profit of what X value.
Okay.
And my salary also is X.
Okay.
Now what is my income going to be termed as? Business income or?
No, it would be normal capital gains and losses. So if in your personal trading account, you are not doing a significant transactions, then it would be capital gain. Whether you have incorporated or not, that does not come into play.
Significant transaction would mean about, let's say I'm doing about 3 trades a week.
That would not count as a significant transaction for sure.
Will not count as significant. All right.
Yeah. So the whole point is you should think yourself as a day trader. Like you are placing a significant trades in a day, and that's where you would be treated as a day traders. Otherwise, no. 3 trades in a week would not count.
Pratik, I do have
3
another.
trades in a week would be a swing trader.
Sorry.
Yeah, swing. So swing trader should be fine, right?
Yeah, but yeah. So basically, the whole test is you need to apply all the factors together. Again, there is
that means all the 6 are not taken collectively. They can be taken in collaboration with each other also.
Yes, exactly. So you need
to either taken individually, not taken collectively.
Yeah. So my point is you need to consider all the factors collectively. Even if you are proving true on 3 or 4 factors, then you would be treated as a day trader. A single factor, let's say a single factor, would not treat as a day trader.
All right.
Okay. Any further question on this?
Somebody else also had a query.
Sure.
Yeah. Pratik, like my question is related to the first and second. For example, in a week, I'll be taking a stock different companies, right? And I'm selling off during the next week, right? Does it impact to the CRA?
So I mean, you have a question on classification, whether it would.
Yes. Like.
Yeah. So basically, I would advise that just consider the capital gain income versus total income. So for example, if you are placing a 5 trade in a week, right? So and another one is placing 150 trades in a week, just for example. But if out of 5 trades you are making $60,000, and if that particular person out of 150 trade is making only $1,000, then what CRA is considered? What is the ratio of this particular income versus total income?
Okay.
If it's significant, business income.
Business income. Okay. And it doesn't matter for any stock like the US or Canadian stock.
Yes.
For them.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. But one thing to note here is, in case of Canadian securities, you have an option to consider the gains and losses as a capital income, even if you are day trading. Okay. For that purpose, you just need to file one particular form with CRA.
Okay.
And once you have selected an option to consider your income as a capital gains and losses, that cannot be rescinded in future.
Okay. Do you have any number? For example, like in a year we are making 20,000. It's okay to the CRA. For example.
To be precise, there is no number, or I mean there are no criterias.
Okay.
It's all like it basically individual to individual, and CRA will take a case study and then CRA will determine.
Okay.
So
by end of the year, we are like, I think from the different software, they're providing the T5, right? On the basis they can easily determine, right, when we submitting it.
Yeah. So once you are giving your number to anyone, CRA will get all the records.
Okay.
Yes.
No worries. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. So the second point is, if you have gains and losses on the short sale of shares, then it would be purely a business income or losses. It would not be treated as a capital gain. Again, you have an option to make an election, which will be then treated as a capital transactions. And the third point, a very important one, with respect to Canadian securities, even if you are day trading, you have an option to treat them as a capital transaction by filing an election with CRA. Any further question on this slide?
Point number, last point. If you're treating only Canadian securities and can be treated as capital transactions, would that be appropriate, or should we actually show it as a business income and put our other expenses also into it and reduce the tax liability?
So that's a very good question. So what you can do before opting for this particular election, you need to work like how much income you are generating as a capital gain and how much income you are generating as a business income. If your business income is lower, then just continue whatever you are doing. If your capital gain is lower, then you should file this particular election. So basically, you need to see which option is working best for you. Am I making sense?
All right. Yeah, it makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Now, so I have put two scenarios over here. First scenario, if your investment gains and losses are considered as a capital gain, then what would be the implications? And if your investment gains and losses are considered as a business income, then what would be the implications? So if it's capital gain, then the taxable base would be only 50%. But if it's business income, the entire gain would be taxable. Similarly, in terms of losses, only 50% of losses are allowed as set off. In terms of business losses, you can set off the entire amount. If you are treating it as a capital loss, then it would be allowed to set off only against capital gain. But if you are treating it as a business loss, then you can set off against any type of income. In case of capital gain, you can carry it back 3 years and you can forward indefinitely. But in case of business loss, you can carry it back 3 years and you can forward only up to 20 years. For capital gain, you can claim only limited expenses, basically expenses which are associated with your purchase and sale transaction. But in case of business loss, you can claim a wider range of expenses. For example, if you are running your trade from home, you can claim your home office expense, you can claim your Wi-Fi expense, mobile expense, your computer, desk, all those expenses you can claim. If you have a capital gain, then you won't be able to contribute to RRSP for that particular gains and losses. But if you are treating it as a business income, then yes, you can do RRSP contribution. RRSP, the point related to RRSP, I will discuss more in detail in the upcoming slides. But apart from the last point, any question or concern for the
Prateek, do you have a numerical example for this slide?
Sorry?
Which we can take it in the, do you have a numerical example for this slide?
Not really.
Not
because
really?
it changes from person to person, right?
I mean, I was just thinking, let's take a numerical example of, let's say, about $100,000.
Yeah.
And then work on it.
So in my
I look at it that business income will be better.
Okay.
It is better to declare it as business income and take all expenses out.
But will your expenses be 50% of your gain? Because in case of capital,
that is what I said. Let's work on a numerical figure. That is why I said, if not now, some other day possible.
Yeah, for sure. But I strongly doubt that your expenses would be 50% of your income.
No, that will never be there. Yes, that will never be there.
Yeah. So in that case, capital gain would be an appropriate treatment from the tax perspective.
Yeah.
Pratik, I do have a question over here. For example, I do have my incorporated over here and it's running the business, right?
Okay.
That is a separate business, for example, for the IT. And if I wanted to do for the stocking related business, like more trading, more maybe the gaining the capital gain, right?
Okay.
So what do you suggest? Like it would be the continuation with the business, or shall I do with the individual?
So you can definitely opt for corporation thing, but in case of corporation, taxes would be very high. So in case of corporation, there is a small business deduction, which is available only for the active business income. If you have passive income in your corporation, then tax rate may go up to 50%, 50.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it would be good with the individual right now, right?
So if you are trading in a small quantity and if your gains and losses are small, I would advise to go personally. If it's making a huge gains and losses, then corporation would be a way to go. But again, you need to consider the tax implications on both the sides.
Yeah, got it.
Okay, so any further questions on first 4 points? RRSP, I will definitely discuss in the upcoming slide, but any questions?
That means, Pratik, in continuing to what Ankit was just asking you,
okay,
even that as he has been incorporated and so has my account been, now I think even he must be having a regular income coming in from him being incorporated. So there is a regular income coming in. So it is not a passive, it's an active income coming in on a monthly basis.
Correct.
There, that if I am generating further trading income, now whether I call it capital gain or I call it business income, I am generating trading income over there, almost to a similar tune or higher tune.
In your corporation?
But my expenses would not be that high so far.
Correct.
So then in that case, it becomes better to take it into a capital gain.
Yeah, because in terms of capital gain, you have flat 50% deduction on your gains.
All right. So that means in case if I have to convert it to a business income, I must have at least 50% expenses to be shown to make it viable for a business income, because then I can show my other expenses also.
Correct. Completely agree with you.
Right?
Yes, makes sense.
Am I right in the terms of numericals?
Yes.
That if I have capital gain and if I have my expenses more than 50% of my capital gain, then it makes sense to show it as a business income.
Yes, completely makes sense.
Lovely. All right.
Excellent. Yeah.
True.
Okay, perfect. So let's move further. So now it's a hot topic, registered retirement savings plan. So let's understand the basics about RRSP. Obviously, RRSP is considered as a superhero of the saving perspective. And why is that? Let's say you are contributing a $15,000 into RRSP, and let's say you have a total income of $80,000. Then the taxes which you need to pay would be on $65,000. So if your marginal tax rate is 45%, then on 15,000 you will save 45% taxes, which will be your upfront return by investing into RRSP. Again, as long as the amount stays within the RRSP account, there are no taxes. The taxes are applicable only when you withdraw money from the RRSP. So two very important points. At the time of contribution, you are getting tax benefits. So if you are into marginal tax rate, RRSP is a way to go. And as long as the amount remains into the plan, there is no tax implication. Now let's understand how to set it up. So there are two ways. Either you can approach bank, credit union, trust or insurance company, or you can open the RRSP on your own as well. Now, what is the difference between two? If you are approaching the bank or any credit union, then you have a very little control over your investment decision, like which products you need to choose. But if you have a self-directed RRSP, you can choose the products on your own as well. Again, you can have more than RRSP at any given point in time, but the total amount which you are contributing in all RRSP account should not exceed your contribution room. What is contribution room? We will discuss in the upcoming slide. Now, who can open RRSP? If you have earned income, if you have social insurance number, and if you have filed taxes in previous year, then you can contribute to RRSP until the December 31st of the year you or your spouse turns 71. This is a very important point. You can contribute to RRSP only up to the year when you turns 71 or your spouse turns 71. So there is a validity period for RRSP. Now, what is the RRSP contribution deadline? So you, in order to claim the deduction in your taxes, you need to contribute into RRSP account within 60 days after the end of the period. So for example, if you want to claim RRSP deduction for your 2020 return, then the maximum timeline by which you need to contribute would be 1st March 2021. So this is all about the RRSP basics. So any question in this slide?
Hi Pratik, this is Aditya.
Yeah, Aditya.
Yeah, I've got a question. Firstly, thanks for explaining this. One question that I have is, you've explained two types of RRSP, one wherein the bank opens and one wherein we can open ourselves.
Correct.
So one question that I have is, how is it that we can decide as to what we want to contribute for in terms of what funds we can allocate our money for? How can we do that?
So like in through the bank or through your self-directed RRSP?
Okay, say for example, I have got an RRSP with my bank, say CIBC,
Okay.
wherein on a say bi-weekly basis, I contribute say $50.
Correct.
Okay, just for a discussion.
Correct.
So and then they invest it based on their this thing, because I'm not sure whether I have chosen anything because I was new when I opened it.
Correct.
But if I say I want to change it, wherein I want to allocate to certain funds or certain type of stocks, how is it that I can do it? Do I need to open another account for my own self, or in the same existing account I can make those changes?
No, so I think what I understand is, so basically you need to tell them your risk appetite, whether you want to go into the high risky portfolio, whether you want to go into medium risky portfolio or low risky portfolio, and accordingly they will do an asset allocation. In my opinion, you have a very little control on the asset allocation.
Okay, that's correct. So another question is, can we trade using our RRSP accounts?
Yes, you can. Yeah, so yes, you can. So both in RRSP account and in TFS account, there is nowhere specifically mentioned that you cannot day trade. You can day trade in RRSP and TFS account, but then you need to aware about the tax consequences. Let's take an example of TFSA. If you withdraw any amount from TFSA, you don't have to pay any taxes. But if you are doing a day trading in your TFSA account, then even if you have not withdrawn any money, you need to pay taxes as a business income, which means the entire gain would be taxable. Same with the RRSP. If you are doing a day trade into your RRSP account, it would be considered as a business income and you would be taxed accordingly. The only difference between TFS and RRSP is, in TFSA, the amount would be taxable at the end of the year, but in RRSP, the amount would be taxable at the time when you withdraw it, not before. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it answers. So I've got another question linked to this, if it's okay to ask. So
Sure.
suppose, say I have got an RRSP limit, say of say 20,000.
Okay.
For this until this particular year, and currently I have contributed 10,000 into my account.
Correct.
And if I say day trade or do some transactions wherein my amount goes up to 20,000 or exceeds it.
Correct.
So would that amount that has exceeded be taxable? That is one question. Wherein in terms of, do I need to, they say that because I've exceeded my contribution limit, that is one question. The second question is, since I have made additional 10,000, can I say that this is my contribution to RRSP and can I get a tax benefit for that?
If you are contributing 10,000 into RRSP account, yes, you will get a credit for that. But if through day trade, that 10,000 becomes 20,000, then 10,000 would be treated as a business income.
Oh, which means that I would need to pay my taxes for that additional 10,000 which I made.
Yes, absolutely. But
okay.
in RRSP, you would be taxable.
Those taxes that we paid when you withdraw the money.
Yes, you withdraw the money. But in TFSA, it would be taxed outright.
Not before that.
Yeah. In RRSP, it would be taxed when you withdraw it. But in TFSA, it would be taxed outright.
Oh, so which means that even if I day trade, but I do not withdraw that money, in RRSP, I can still have it. It's only when I'm withdrawing after the age of 65, 70, whatever is when I actually pay taxes.
Yes, that's right.
Okay. And what happens if, as part of my trading, suppose say I've made money which exceeds my limit?
That won't impact your contribution room.
Or that won't incur my contribution. Okay.
No.
Thank you.
So if exceeding that amount, does it consider for the next RRSP room?
No.
No.
So only thing which would count towards contribution would be the amount which you have originally put into the RRSP. If it goes through the value appreciations or through income, it won't impact your contribution room.
Okay, understood.
Okay, so now these are certain investment products which you can invest into your RRSP account. So these are called as qualified investments. And if you go to the CRA website, you will see a complete list of qualified investment. But for an example, it would include cash, mutual fund, securities listed on designated stock exchange, a guaranteed investment certificate, bonds, and certain shares of small business corporation. So these are just an example of qualified investments. There are other qualified investments as well, and you can definitely refer those on CRA website. Moving next, how much can I contribute to RRSP in a year? So basically, the amount which you can contribute into RRSP is called your contribution room. Now it's made up of three things. First, the unused deduction at the end of preceding year. On the top of that, you need to add the lower of the following two items. First, 18% of your earned income, and second, the annual RRSP limit, which is $27,230 for 2020. And then you need to deduct any company-sponsored pension plan. Let's understand through this example. So Tina is employed full-time in 2020 and her income was $50,000 pre-tax. There is no pension plan provided by employer. So her contribution room for 2020 would be lower of 18% of 50,000 or 27,230. So it would be 9,000. So Tina can contribute up to 9,000 into RRSP for 2020. Now let's make a small change. If she contributes only 5,000, so then she will have a 4,000 unused contribution room and it will be added next year. So in 2020, her starting point would be $4,000, which is unused deduction at the end of preceding year, plus she will get a new room for 2021. Any question on this? Okay, one thing, you don't need to count this particular contribution room. You can readily get this contribution room on your CRA account or on your notice of assessment, or you can call CRA and ask them what is my limit for 2021. So this is just for the illustrative purpose and you don't need to break your head in calculating this particular contribution room. It's just for an example.
Pratik, one quick question. So if we use the withdraw the money as a first term buyer from the RRSP, right?
Okay.
And again, I believe there are cumulative of the certain years we need to pay, right?
Correct.
So what do you prefer? Any of the like, if we can pay first year, if we don't pay it, so it would be considering the second year. How it would be the calculation?
So there is another slide completely dedicated to this home buyers plan. So
okay,
we can definitely discuss on this particular topic in that particular slide.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Pratik, in continuation to the same slide. Now, assuming Tina had a contribution of limit of $9,000.
Correct.
And as you say, she made a contribution of $5,000.
Correct.
Right now, in her RRSP account, she starts trading, and she makes a profit of another about $6,000.
Correct.
So that means her contribution was 5.
Correct.
Her profit was 6.
Correct.
Can she convert that $6,000 to that 4,000 unused eligible contribution?
No, so 6,000 will not impact in any manner. You can still contribute 4,000.
That means that 4,000 will be carried for the next year.
Yes.
And in case if she wants, she can put 4,000 additional to whatever the limit for the next year is.
Perfectly makes sense. Yeah, I agree with you.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Sorry, this is Aditya again. One more question.
Yeah, Aditya, yes.
So basically, suppose say I've got say 50,000 and I've got a non-working spouse So is there any way that I can open an RRSP account for her, or is it only for me I can do that?
We will discuss this as well. So I have covered this topic as well.
Oh, sure. Thank you so much.
Okay. Okay. So moving on to the next. So there are certain questions which we will answer one by one. First question, is there any penalty for over contribution in RRSP? Yes. If you are contributing over your limit, then there would be penalty of 1% per month. There is a grace amount of $2,000. So let's understand through example. Let's say your RRSP contribution room is $10,000. Now in a particular year, you can contribute up to $12,000 because CRA is giving you 2,000 grace amount. But if you are exceeding 12,000, then you need to start paying 1% per month. So if in the month of January, your room was 10,000, and if you have invested $15,000, then you need to pay interest of 1% for 12 months on $3,000, which would be $360 for a year.
Can you continue doing 2,000 over contribution every year and not get
Yes. Yes, 2,000 is a grace amount given every year.
And if you have a contribution room from previous years, in that year also you can go over?
Yes. So 2,000 is a grace amount given every year, which you can invest up to, but above that limit, the penalty will start getting attracted.
Pradeep, to come to the same question again, Tina in the previous slide had a figure of $9,000.
Correct.
RRSP contribution. She contributed 5, 4 was pending.
Correct.
Right. Now go back to the next slide. This year, her RRSP contribution limit is 10,000, as you said so. So she contributes 12 to come to that 2,000 contribution over contribution limit without penalty.
Correct.
Now, if Tina decides to add another 4,000 as contribution of the previous year, will that be penalized or will that be accepted?
So, so 10,000 is made up of all these three things, right?
So that means last year her limit was 9,000. She had contributed 5 and unused was 4.
Correct.
This year, her limit is 10,000.
So 10,000.
So she first contributes her 4,000 for the previous year.
Correct. So basically, the 10,000.
This year her limit is 10,000. Yeah, tell me.
So,
sorry.
So if 4,000 is the carry forward amount from previous year, and if she is getting 10,000 more for that particular year, then her contribution room would be $14,000. So she can contribute up to $14,000.
Plus 2,000. Plus 2,000 penalty.
Yeah, but again, that's a grace amount which is given by CRA. If CRA finds out that you are taking an undue advantage every year, then you know it's up to CRA. Basically.
Then you can be charged a penalty.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
It's a grace.
The ideal situation would be to go up to 14 and say thank you very much.
Correct. Exactly. So basically, 2,000 amount is given to basically make a point that if you have accidentally over contribute, then you can contribute up to 2,000. But if you are taking that particular privilege as your right, then you may get penalty for that.
All right. Now, assumingly, I have accidentally over contributed. Instead of 10, I've given contribution of 14.
Correct.
And I realize my mistake.
Correct.
Can I withdraw the balance for?
Yes, you can withdraw the balance. Obviously, it would be taxable for sure, but you can withdraw the balance.
But if I've done it, let's say I've done it in the month of January.
Correct.
Or in the month of March.
Correct.
And I've withdrawn immediately in the month of March or April itself.
Correct. Then there will be no penalty.
So I will still be penalized and taxed.
No.
Then there's no penalty. All right.
So if you come to know immediately and if you withdraw the money, there would be no penalty. And again, there are some requests which you can make CRA, and CRA will waive the penalty if CRA finds out that the mistake is genuine.
All right.
CRA is very kind, for sure.
Yeah, that could be the case. Maybe if the person wanted to transfer the money in TFSA and that accidentally goes into the RRSP, you know.
Correct. Correct.
So that kind of time we make a reverse, and that could be informed to them, right?
Yeah, perfect. Okay, next question. Can I
Uh,
claim?
just one question. So this calculation of penalty, does it happen once a year, or when does the CRA calculate that on this account the person has exceeded the contribution room, so he should be made to
So,
pay the penalty? When is that calculation done usually?
so in the month of January, let's say you have overshooted the contribution room, CRA will come to know immediately because they have all the details. So then they will send you a notice that, hey, Kamal, you have exceeded the contribution. Please pay penalty. That's it.
So
So
it's immediate.
yeah, so as long as the money stays into account, you need to pay penalty. So obviously, an ideal option would be to withdraw the money. That's it, just to avoid the penalty.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, next question. Can I claim the foreign tax credit in RRSP account? So as per the Canada and US tax treaty, if you are holding a US stock into RRSP account, and if you are getting dividends on that, then there should be no foreign withholding taxes as per the treaty. But if, despite of the particular treaty, if the foreign taxes are withheld, then you cannot claim that particular credit into your CRA while filing your taxes. So no credit is available into RRSP account for the foreign taxes paid. Any question on this particular point?
Yeah, do we claim to the CRA? Because I had a similar incident, like withhold, right? The US stock into the RRSP. And
Okay.
so do we claim to the CRA? The amount is very minimal, so I didn't do much.
You cannot claim it. It's not available.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So basically, you need to find one particular. You need to file one particular form, which is called 8-BAN form. I'm not sure about that particular technicality, but if you file that particular form, then they will not withhold tax on your RRSP account.
Okay. Yeah. Got it.
Okay. The third question: can I contribute to the spouse RRSP? Now, this is very important point from the tax planning perspective. The answer is yes. You can contribute either into your RRSP account or into your spouse RRSP account. So just to give an example, let's say in a particular year, your RRSP contribution room is 15,000. So 10,000 you can invest into your RRSP account, and 5,000 you can invest into your spouse RRSP account. If you have already used a 15,000 contribution room into your RRSP account, then you cannot contribute, because whatever money you are contributing to your spouse RRSP, that would be counted towards your contribution room, not your spouse contribution room. Now, what's the benefit? The benefit is when the money is withdrawn from the RRSP account, it will be included in spouse income and not in your income. The only exception is you need to keep the money into spouse RRSP account for a period of 2 years. If you withdraw before 2 years, it will be included in your income. But if you withdraw after 2 years, it will be included in your wife's income. Any question on this particular point?
Won't it depend on whose account it is withdrawn? I mean, I may contribute from my account and withdraw the amount in spouse bank account. So won't it depend on that?
So, sorry, I didn't get your question, but my point is, let's say you have opened your spouse RRSP account. So what you can do, you can contribute into that particular RRSP account through your banking channel. So you will get the deduction for the contribution, and then when money is withdrawn, it will be included in spouse income. Does that answer your question?
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, so Pratik, I've got a question. So suppose, say, in case you've got a non-working spouse and then you open an RRSP account, say the contribution limit is say 15,000 for the first 2 years, and I invest say 5,000.
50,000 is your limit?
Yeah, 15,000 is my limit, because since she's not working, her limit will be 0 anyways, right?
Okay.
Okay. So what I do is I invest 10 in my account and say 5 in her account and keep it for 2 years.
Correct.
After 2 years, say I withdraw that 5,000. So would it go as her income, which is going to be taxed, or would it go as an additional to my income and get taxed?
Her income. her income.
Her income. So if she's non-working, then anyways, that's a benefit for us, right? But then we'll
Yeah,
get back our.
Yeah, absolutely. So point is, let's say you are into high tax bracket and your spouse is in low tax bracket. So
Okay.
it's always a good idea to contribute into her account.
Okay.
You will
Even
get
if she's non-working.
Yeah, because you will get the deduction for the money contributed and it will be taxable in spouse hand, not in your hands.
Okay.
I think
But
in case
she'll
if
anyways
the
not be
spouse is
taxed,
a-
right? Sorry, go on.
Continue.
Okay, so one question is, so anyway, she'll not be taxed because she's not earning. It's only when a withdraw is when actually the tax bracket comes into picture.
Correct. That's right.
Okay, and one last question before someone is going to ask. So suppose, say, if I start doing it on a regular basis, year on year, say 2,000, 3,000. So it's my initial contribution that is valid for 2 years and the next contribution another 2 years that way, right? Suppose, say, first year I contribute 5. So that is after 2 years. Second year I contribute 3. So the 3,000 is after the next 2 years.
Yes.
That way it is counted, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much for that.
2-year limit applies to each.
Pratik,
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, Pratik, just another subsequent question to this. Now, assuming my spouse is a low salary, low income bracket, and she has her own limits on RRSP account.
Correct.
Now, if with my contribution, her RRSP gets completely filled in,
Correct.
then she cannot deposit her RRSP balance.
No, she can deposit.
Her contribution can be 0.
No, she can deposit because the money which you are contributing for your spouse would be counted towards your contribution, not your wife's contribution.
That means if her contribution limit is 5,000, she can contribute 5. And if my limit is 15 or 20 or whatever the value is, I can contribute whatever I want in my account and balance I can put it into her account.
Absolutely correct.
And I can withdraw that 2 years, 24 months later. 24 months or 2 years?
2 years. So if I have contributed in 2019 in any month, then you can withdraw after 2021.
That means if I can deposit that amount in December 2019,
correct.
In Jan 2021, I can withdraw it.
22.
19 and 20, 2 years.
No,
21
so
I withdraw.
After the end of the year.
Up to the end of the year, all right.
Yeah.
Fine.
So if you're contributed in 2019, then you need to wait for 2020 and 2021.
Suppose, say, just to add on to Vivek's question, suppose, say, if I contribute in, say, 19 January,
correct.
So would it be 21 Feb or 22 Jan?
22 Jan.
Oh, so irrespective of whenever you contribute, the whole year is taken into consideration. So it's basically the financial year, not 24 months.
No, 2 years.
That's the reason why I asked for 2 years or...
No, 2 years after the end of financial year, in which you...
Okay, got it. That clarifies. Yeah,
okay.
Thanks, Vivek sir, for asking that question. Valid one. Thanks, Pratik, for answering.
Okay. That's typical Indian mind. play on time zones.
Oh yeah, and then look for loopholes as well.
Okay, next question.
Very true.
Okay, can we go further? Okay, so next question: Can you withdraw money from RRSP? Yes, you can, but this would be treated as an ordinary income, whether you have earned it as a dividend or capital gain. To give you an example, let's say you have contributed 1,000 into RRSP, and after 5 years, it becomes 10,000. Now, if you withdraw 10,000, you need to pay tax on the entire 10,000. If it would have been in the normal account, then you would be paying taxes only on $4,500. But if it's into RRSP, then you need to pay tax on entire $10,000. Any question on this?
No.
Okay. Next, can I withdraw money from RRSP without attracting taxes? Yes. There are 2 ways under which even if you withdraw money, there would be no tax liability for the money which you have withdrawn from RRSP. First is home buyers plan and second is lifelong learning plan. I will discuss this in the next slide. But before that, let me take another question. Do I need to terminate my RRSP at any point in time? Yes. In the year when you turn 71 years of age, you have 3 options. Either terminate your RRSP. So if you withdraw any money from RRSP, it would be taxable as a business, as an ordinary income. you have a second option of transfer it to the registered retirement income fund. Now, at the time of transfer, there would be no tax consequences. But when income is received from RRIF, you need to pay taxes. And the third, you can either purchase annuity as well. So when annuity payment is made, it would be taxable. So at the age of 71, you need to exercise either of the option. But there cannot be RRSP in your name.
So Pratik, one question. So suppose say, is there any way that say before we turn 21 that we can start RRSP and start receiving it as income or a regular RRIF or something like that, or it's only after 71 we can actually get money from that?
No, RRIF you can invest at this point in time as well. So it's a
Okay.
normal fund basically.
Okay, one question I have is, suppose say, if say I start only working until the age of say 60
Okay.
for discussion's sake, and until then I contribute RSP. After that I don't contribute. So what happens? So can I start getting it as my income from the age of 61, or do I need to wait until 71 when I actually get it as my income back?
No, you can withdraw money from RRSP at any point in time. The only thing is it would be taxable.
When you say taxable, it is based on the it is going to get added to my that current year's tax, my
Yes.
income
Yes,
to tax,
that's
right?
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
So if I go to the first slide, so it would be treated as your other income.
Okay. Thanks for this.
Okay.
Pratik, I have a question here.
Sure, go ahead.
Since we can withdraw after 71 years old, there would be cases when someone might expire before 71 years old. So what happens in that case?
So then it would be taxable in the hands of recipient, which would be normally your spouse.
But you can transfer this
Yes.
money can be transferred to spouse RRSP account without any penalty or taxes, right?
Yes.
Can it be transferred to any other relative like parents or any?
Actually, I need to look into that topic. I can definitely look and we'll get back to you whether you can transfer to other relatives as well or not.
I think there is a nominee we can define into that, or if you have the kid or something, the spouse, that goes into that part.
No, but nominee will be taxable unless it's a spouse. Again, if you transfer to spouse RRSP account, then no taxes. Otherwise, it's always taxable.
Yep.
Thanks, Ankit.
Thank you.
Okay, next is home buyers plan. So this would be very important consideration for those who would be thinking to purchase home in the coming years. So if you have contributed money to RRSP account, then you can withdraw this money for the purpose of home buying without attracting any taxes. So there are certain conditions. Let's look one by one. First, you need to consider a first-time home buyer. Second, you must be resident of Canada at the time when you withdraw the money and at the time when you are buying a qualifying home. Third, you should occupy that particular home within a period of 1 year. Now, what is the maximum amount that you can withdraw? You can withdraw up to $35,000. So this 35,000 is available to both the persons, individual and spouse. So in together, you can withdraw up to $70,000. Once you withdraw the money, you have 15 years to pay the money back to your RSP account. So let's take an example. If you are withdrawing $15,000 in 2020, then you have 15 years to pay that money back. So every year you can pay $1,000. You need to repay the money in the second year. So for example, if I am withdrawing the money in 2020, then the first payment has to go out by the end of 2022. And the last is the money has to be there in RRSP account at least for a period of 90 days before you withdraw it for the purpose of buying a home. So it has to be there for a period of 90 days.
Pratik, that means if I withdraw 15,000 rupees in the year, let's say October 2020,
correct,
I can restart paying this money not in 21, but in 22.
Yes, that's right.
Jan 22 onwards.
Correct.
Anytime between Jan and December 2022, I have to make this payment.
Yes, absolutely.
So that means I could make this payment in the month of December 2022 and still be fine.
Yes, you are fine with that. Yes.
Pratik, another question. For example, some circumstances I won't be able to pay second year. For
Okay.
example, the income loss or anything. Then what should be the step? Like it would be considering the another year to accumulative both the year payment, or what should we do? Like
So it would be treated as your income in the year when you are not able to make a payment. So in the second year, if you are not paying $1,000 the second installment, then it would be treated as your income.
oh, I see. Okay. And another question. So, for example, if planning, I utilize 35,000 for the particular first home.
Correct.
How about the second home? If I wanted to getting this 35,000 credit or not, like.
No, it's only for the first time home buyer. So the definition of first time home buyer is in a period of 4 years, you should not occupy another home.
Okay. For example, if I'm trying to buy a second home from my wife,
correct,
and during the first home buyer, we don't use like RRSP from
correct.
her account. So does it considering for her as a first home buyer or not?
No, it's per family.
Per family. Okay.
Yes.
One question is what Ankit has already asked you. Assumingly my spouse and we together withdraw, that you already answered.
Correct.
Now, can I be sole buyer for the flat first house, first time buyer, and my wife or my spouse be the first time buyer after 2 or 3 years as an individual?
No, so the first time home buyer benefit is per family.
Another to subsequent questions. For example, I wanted to buy a house for my son on his name. Does it considering per family or?
For son, I need to check because
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure about the spouse, but I can check for the son and we'll get back to you.
Sure.
I think one more thing. You mentioned in the third point, you must occupy your home within 1 year of buying it or building it.
Correct.
Now, if I have withdrawn this RRSP account
Correct.
to build a new home,
Correct.
and the home building has taken me about 2 years.
Correct.
So I have, let's say, withdrawn the account in 2019.
Correct.
My home building has taken on till 2021.
Correct.
So then I will start repaying this amount in 2023.
No, the repayment will start in 2021.
Why? Because I'm still rebuilding it.
Yeah, so basically you need to occupy that particular house within 1 year after building it. But the payment will...
I am still building it. 2019, I have withdrawn RRSP 35,000.
Yeah.
I started building a house.
Correct.
That house building has gone on till 2021.
Correct.
Now I will occupy it at the end of 2021. That means in 2022, I occupy it.
Correct.
So when do I pay the first payout?
Yeah, so the condition is you need to make a payment in the second year after the time when you withdraw the funds. So if you have withdrawn,
I am using it for buying it or building it. If I'm building it,
yeah,
it is still in the process. I will occupy the property only in 2021.
correct.
I have withdrawn in 19.
Yeah. Yeah, so the condition for repayment starts from the day you withdraw it. It has no connection when you are buying it or when you are constructing it. Because otherwise people will start taking undue advantage, right? They will give a justification that I have not built a home yet, so I won't make a payment. CRA says if you are withdrawing in a particular year, you need to make a payment in the second year.
All right.
Irrespective of the fact when you are building it or when you are buying it.
I'm sure there must be an Indian CRA who was giving them this idea.
Oh my God. Yeah. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. It does. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. So this is all about the RRSP. So do we like to continue with TFSO or would you like to go into another session next week?
I do have very important question. Maybe that question for all of us. Maybe suppose like since we are doing the day traders, right, or swing traders, right? Maybe every in a month, like 4 or 5 times, right? What do you suggest? We do have the non-registered account. That is first account. That is a TFSA. That is RRSP.
Yeah.
So for the day trader or swing trader or frequent trading, are we doing into the TFSA or non-registered account? What do you suggest?
So, so basically, there is no prohibition from where you can do a day trade. If you are day trading, it would be treated as a business income. And now, if you are doing it from the personal account and TFS account, it would be taxable in the same year. And if you are doing it from the RRSP, it would be taxable when you are withdrawing it.
So it does not relate it to the CRA where exactly you are doing it, because TFSA we have to define the limit, right? Whereas in non-registered account, it's kind of an individual, right?
Correct.
Take it, sell it, like you buy it, sell it, take it one more round, right? Because I asked the same question to the service provider.
Correct.
They said that non-registered would be the safest because the TFSA they have to declare to the CRA, right?
Yeah. So the purpose of TFSA, the money goes tax free. Now, if you are doing a day trade from TFS account, then it will consider as you are taking an undue advantage of TFSA account, and then the CRA will red flag it, and you will invite unnecessary consequences from CRA. So you should definitely prohibit day trade from TFSA account, in my opinion.
Got it. Yeah.
Yeah. But in terms of tax consequences, there are no differences.
Yeah, I do have a couple of more questions, but we can go with the TFSA.
Prateek, you should get free next week for us to ask you questions again.
Yeah, for sure. You can message me personally, or you can give me a call anytime. So you don't need to wait for another week for that.
We'd like to hear your voice once again next weekend.
Okay, sure. Okay.
Hi. Yeah, this is Sammy. I'm just going to ask a question. It's a more general question from a strategy standpoint. Are there any, comparing the RRSP contributions to the TFSA contributions, right? Yeah. What is the recommended strategy to defer the taxes based on what situations would you want to put more money into the RRSP as opposed to TFSA or vice versa?
Yeah, so let's consider certain points. So first is obviously the time horizon. So if you want to invest for a short period of time, go with TFSA, not RRSP. Second, if you are into high tax bracket and if you want to save your taxes in present, go with RRSP. The third, it's always good to fund your retirement, and from that perspective, the RRSP is a very good option because by the time you turn, let's say 71, 75, you won't have much active income. So even if you are withdrawing money from the RRSP account, you will be still in a lower tax bracket. So if you are contributing into RRSP in present, you will get, let's say, tax credit of 45% because you are into high tax bracket. But in future, when you withdraw it, you will have to pay taxes only like, let's say 25% or 30%, depending on your income. So there is no right or wrong answer to these particular questions. I would advise you should take benefit of both the accounts.
At what point do you know that you should be spending more money or putting more money into the TFSA if you're maxing out your RRSP contributions? Is that the point, or do you have any thoughts or recommendations on that?
So my personal experience is each year I will put 40% into RRSP and 60% into TFSA. Because obviously, let's say after 2 years, I want to go on a particular vacation, I will need fund for that. And obviously for the retirement purpose, I will need some funds. So for the shorter duration, I will withdraw it from TFSA. And for the longer duration, I will withdraw it from RRSP.
So I think you already called it out, Prateek, but the key consideration here is how do you plan to use that investment? You want to use it for a near term or let's say 5 year down the line, you want to use that investment, then obviously you would want to put it in TFSA because RRSP you cannot withdraw unless you are willing to pay taxes.
Correct.
Right. So as part of your financial plan, you have to decide how much you want to plan for next 5, 10 years, 15 years, kids education or whatever, and how much you want to put aside for your own retirement, right? So make that plan and then you put on it, right? That's one thing. Second thing, I think that also you called out, Prateek, if you have a higher income, then one of the strategies that a lot of people use is invest into RRSP, claim that tax benefit because you are in a highest marginal rate, and whatever return you get in a tax, right, use that return to invest into your TFSA.
Completely makes sense.
Okay.
And
also the types of investment, I guess, does that have a bearing on whether you're going to put it in a TFSA or an RRSP? Meaning, do you want to go more aggressive growth type stocks in TFSA perhaps, as opposed to RRSP with a more balanced portfolio in there?
So there is no bar or prohibition from the types of product which you want to select in each account. It should be as per your risk appetite. I agree with your point that in TFSA, higher aggressive product would be preferable, and in RRSP, because you will be using that particular fund for retirement purpose, you will go with less risky portfolio.
Okay, thank you.
Pratik, I do have another question, questions. For example, I'm giving you just tactics for the numeric example. Like 20, let's say my limit is 20,000 for TFSA. Everything I invested in, right? As a stocking, I'm getting very good profit in particular one stock.
Correct.
I'm selling out, right? Correct. Then my limit would be like 14,000. You know. Again, I'm going into the another script and buying in and making equal as a 20,000.
Correct.
So do I need to pay the tax or not?
Absolutely. We will discuss it in the coming slide.
Okay.
So should we move further? Okay. So now let's understand some basics about tax-free saving account. So the first, whatever money you are contributing into TFSA account, you cannot claim it as deductible for the tax purpose. But the good point is, when you withdraw money from TFSA, it goes completely tax-free. So no taxes need to be paid at the time of withdrawing money from TFSA. The third point is, if you are borrowing money from someone and if you are paying an interest on that, you cannot claim interest as a deductible. The same situation goes with RRSP as well. If you are withdrawing money, if you are borrowing money from someone for RRSP investment, you cannot claim interest expense as a deductible in your tax return. Setup is similar to RRSP, so I won't go into detail for that. Now, the third point is very important. Who can open TFSA? So any individual who is 18 years of age and who has a valid insurance, social insurance number can invest in TFSA, which means even non-resident can invest in TFSA. But if you are a non-resident and if you are investing into TFSA, then you have to pay tax of 1% for each month the contribution stays into the account. So that's a flip part for the non-resident if they want to invest in TFSA. The fourth point, let's say after certain years, I am withdrawing money from TFSA account. Will it impact my government benefits? No. Any money which you withdraw from TFSA account will not impact your childcare benefits or GST benefit or any other benefits which you are entitled to receive from CRA. So any question on this slide? Okay, let's move further. So the investment products are similar to RRSP, so I won't go into the detail. Now this is very important. How much can I contribute to TFSA in a year? So again, this is called a contribution room and it's made up of 3 items. First, your unused contribution room at the start of the year. Second, your TFSA dollar limit for a particular year. And third, and very important, the withdrawals which you have made from the TFSA in the previous year. Now let's quickly understand through one example. Tina is neither my wife's name nor any relative. It's just I have used for the example purpose. So Tina became a resident of Canada in 2019. In 2019, her contribution room was $6,000. She has contributed $2,000 and she has withdrawn $1,000 from TFSA account. So first, let's understand what is the unused TFSA contribution, which will be available next year. She was allowed 6,000. She has contributed 2,000. So the unused contribution room is $4,000. The withdrawal will not impact my contribution room next year. Now let's understand what would be the 2020 contribution room. So 4,000 you have already determined, plus you will get a new limit for 2020, which would be 6,000. And then if in prior year you have made any withdrawal, it will be added in the contribution room next year. So the 2020 contribution room would be 4,000 plus 6,000 plus the withdrawal of 1,000, which would be $11,000. Any question on this?
Hi Pratik. Yeah, I've got a question. Aditya here again.
Sure.
Suppose say my contribution limit for say 2019 is 6,000.
Correct.
And I contributed 6,000, and as part of my trading, say I made 9,000.
Correct.
Okay. So what would be my contribution limit for 2020? Would it be my limit minus 9,000 or limit minus 6,000?
No, you will get a new 6,000 limit. Any income which you have generated in TFS account will not impact your contribution room next year.
But does it increase my room for the limit then? So does it become 15,000 then overall?
No, because you have fully invested 6,000 in 2019, right?
Yeah.
So you have exhausted the entire contribution room. So
correct. And I've got additional 3,000 as well. So now it has become 9,000 now.
So what is 3,000 additional? Sorry.
Okay, so basically I've invested 6,000 in my TFSA account. My room was 6,000. I invested 6,000.
Correct.
Okay, but based on the increase in my stock portfolio, the 6,000 has become 9,000 now.
Correct.
My next year limit is 6,000 again.
Correct.
So now, would my contribution room become 15,000 because I've earned 3,000, or would be only 6,000 plus 6,000, 12,000?
For 2020, so for 2020, it would be 6,000 only.
I think what you are asking, what he is asking is, he invested 6,000 in 2019. In 2019 itself, it became 9,000. Let's say he withdrew that 9,000 by December.
Correct.
Okay, so he also withdrew the profit on his account, which is non-taxable because it's a TFSA.
Correct.
But your new limit for 2020 would still be 6,000 for 2019 and 6,000 for 2020. You don't get a higher limit because you withdrew 9,000.
No, it would be 15,000. So basically 9,000 the withdrawal amount plus the 6,000 the new limit.
Oh, it would be 15,000.
Yeah, it's withdrawal.
Oh, so if you withdraw, that amount gets added.
Yes.
Into the room. Oh, great. Thanks.
Pratik, how does the amount get added? Because your limit is 6,000 per annum.
Correct.
6,000 for 19, 6,000 for 2020. Now, if my investments in 19 have enhanced and grown.
Correct.
And I have taken that profit out because it is tax-free for me.
Correct.
Why should I be allowed to again deposit that again as an enhanced value?
Yeah, so basically CRA is giving benefits to TFS account holder. So whatever money you are simply withdrawing, that will be added next year. So there is no specification whether it would be the original amount, whether it would be
irrespective of the limit.
Yes.
Irrespective of the limit of investment. My investment was 6. I have grown it to 12 in 19.
Correct.
In 2019, my investment limit was 6,000. I invested 6,000 in January 19. It grew to 12,000 by September 19.
Correct.
In November 19, I withdrew the full amount of 18,000 rupees.
Correct.
Now, if I withdrawn 18,000, I deposited 6. I had withdrawn 18. In 2020, I will deposit 12 plus 18.
6 plus 18.
6 plus 18.
Yes.
All right.
So whatever withdrawals.
And that is all tax free.
All tax free, yeah. So whatever withdrawals you are making in a particular year, that will be added next year.
And when will this amount be taxed, if at all it will be taxed?
No tax. No tax on TFSA.
For example, if my contribution is 6,000, right? But it would be added like 10,000. So what would happen during the next year?
Sorry, I didn't get your question.
So my question is like, if it is my contribution required 6,000, but still having a money because I'm keep getting a capital gain, right?
Correct.
And overall it would be 10,000 till end of the 2019.
Correct.
So what would be the limit for 2020? Is it 6, going to be
the new
6,000?
Yeah.
Though I have not withdrawn money, then
if you have not withdrawn money, then you will get a new limit of 6,000. If you withdraw money, it will be added in your new limit.
Okay.
Makes sense?
Pratik, every one of us should only be using TFSA for trading.
So if someone wants to exploit it, then they might withdraw in December.
Yeah.
And then
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, very good strategy.
I mean, if there's a trader like me or like Kamal or anybody or like Ankit, who's a swing trader, I would deposit 6,000 in January of the year, capitalize on it, let it grow, and in December 15th, I withdraw the full amount.
Yeah, and it will be added.
And again, January, I go back and deposit the whole account. I am completely tax free.
Yeah, completely makes sense.
And actually, it's as good as you are not withdrawing, because the amount that you are withdrawing,
yes,
that's the same amount that's getting added.
Is there a limit to my contribution window?
Yeah, so it's 6,000 is the yearly contribution limit.
6,000 is the yearly contribution limit, and I can grow on that.
Yes.
Then I think I should stop trading in any other account. Keep only TFS accounts and keep trading there.
Yeah, you can keep the money in TFSA for short period, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, your preference.
So keep it for 11 months, 15 days, and then withdraw it after that. Let it grow.
Yeah, this is also good lesson learned from me, because I do non-registered account as a swing trade or day trade because of not to be catching to the CRA. But this is good to know if I do in TFS as well.
Yeah, but one point is, let's say your TFSA contribution room is 6,000. You are investing 6,000 in January. Now in March, let's say if you are withdrawing 9,000, then in that particular year, you cannot recontribute again. Then you need to wait up to next year.
No, Pradeep. Yeah, Pradeep, that is the idea. You deposit the money January 2nd of the year.
Yeah.
Play with the capital till December 15th.
Correct.
December 20th, you withdraw the full capital and make the account zero.
Yeah.
And January 2nd, you re-add the account.
Yes. It will increase your limit next year, for sure.
What's the benefit?
Benefit is that you are not paying taxes at all.
The benefit is next year you will get a higher limit.
Yeah, but it's as good as not withdrawing. So if you don't withdraw, and
it is as good as not withdrawing.
If you keep the amount in the TSFA account, it's as good as that.
So unless you plan to withdraw this money, invest into a RSP, get tax refund, right? And like maximize your RSP contribution, and then again use that tax rebate to reinvest next year. So if you want to play around, then you can do that.
Yes.
Exactly.
So
you have 15 days, last 2 weeks of December to play with it.
Are we getting confused with the fact that RSP contributions are pre-tax dollars and the TFSA is after-tax dollars?
Yeah, that's a very good point. But if you have savings from back country or past savings, then TFSA is a very good option. If you are investing pre-tax income in RRSP and the post-tax income in TFSA, then the result would be the same. If your tax situation
again, there is no point of withdrawing the TFSA towards end of the year and putting the same account if you don't have any other use, right?
Exactly.
It doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't make any sense.
Purpose? Yeah.
No. The only point when it will make,
why not?
The only point where it will make sense is if sales prices are going down, then withdraw it and again reinvest when the prices are down.
So even in that case, we can just
sell the shares. You can just move to cash.
Pradeep,
yeah.
Within ATFS, you move to cash or money market and then buy again when prices are down. Like you don't have to withdraw.
Pradeep, let me play on a figure on you. My limit is 6,000 per year.
Yes.
Right now in January 19, I invest 6,000, which is the TFSA dollar limit.
Correct.
Right. I grow this to a value of about 12,000 at the end of by November end or 2019. I withdraw it out in December, so I'm withdrawing about $12,000 in December.
Correct.
2020 January, I can deposit 6,000 of 2020. Can I deposit the previous withdrawn amount, full amount? Yes. Of 12,000.
Yes.
That makes it 18,000.
Yes.
Plus, I have not yet deposited 19 amount. Can I add that 19 and add to it?
No, 19 you already invested.
But I already withdrawn it already outside also.
No, but so withdrawal does not count towards the contribution room. So if you have initially invested 6,000, then in future, if you withdraw, let's say 6,000, then you cannot again recontribute 6,000 in the same year.
All right. Then it makes sense to what the others were saying. It doesn't really help you out that way.
So basically, CRA is just giving you the flexibility that if you, by any reason, if you have to withdraw money in a particular year, don't worry, it will be added in a next year.
Yeah, so every year it would be 6,000. For 3 years, accumulative 18,000, right? That was we need to consider.
Correct. Yeah. So again, you don't have to calculate this limit. You will get it either on your notice of assessment, your CRA account, or you can call CRA as well. Okay. Hopefully, yeah, last slide. So first, can I withdraw fund from TFSA? Yes, any amount at any point in time. Second point is, if you withdraw money from your TFSA account, it won't impact the contribution in that particular year. Meaning, let's say in January, you have contributed $6,000. Then if you are withdrawing $3,000, you cannot again recontribute $3,000 in 2019. Because you have already contributed 6,000 initially, so you have completely exhausted your room for that particular year. And the third point is, withdrawals which you are making in a particular year will be added to the contribution room next year. The second point, can I recontribute to TFSA in the same year? Yes, if you have a room available. The same example, let's say you have 6,000 contribution room for any particular year. You have invested 4,000, then you are fully withdrawing 4,000. That does not make your contribution room again zero, which means if you want to recontribute again, you can contribute only 2,000 additional, which is 6,000 minus 4,000. You cannot again recontribute $6,000 fully. Am I making sense?
So one question actually.
So,
let's say you have last 4 years you have been a resident here, but you have not contributed to TFSA.
Correct.
Right, and then so your contribution room has grown to let's say 20,000.
Correct.
Okay, then you contribute in 2019 to TFSA.
Correct.
And including 2019 contribution limit. So let's say you contributed 26,000 in
Correct.
2019.
Correct.
It grew to 30,000.
Correct.
And you withdraw all of that amount.
Okay.
Okay, and so that withdrawal becomes your contribution now for new year 20, right?
Yes.
Now let's say other way. So first 4 years you had a contribution room of 20,000 which you never used.
Correct.
And in 2019 you invested only 10,000. So you
Correct.
had still some contribution left from the previous years.
Correct.
Right, now you did the full withdrawal in 2019. Whatever you invested, you withdrew everything out.
Correct.
So in 2020, how does it work? Does the withdrawal reset your previous unused contribution room?
Yeah, so again you will be back to $20,000 at the start of the next year.
So previous few years contribution room which was never used will still be available for you.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it will carry forward all the years.
Okay. Thanks.
The third point is TFSA really a tax-free account? So there are 3 scenarios where you may end up paying taxes on TFSA account. The first point is over contribution. If you are over contributing in your TFSA account, then you have to pay penalty of 1% each month. The excess contribution remains in TFSA. So there is a small example. We will go into that after discussing 2 points. The second, if you are withdrawing fund from one financial institution, and if you are depositing into another financial institution, it will be treated as a recontribution and you have to pay penalty tax on that. So for example, if with company X, I am not satisfied with the performance, I am withdrawing the money and I am depositing into institution Y, then it would be treated as an over contribution and you have to pay penalty on that. The ideal way is to make a direct transfer from institution X to institution Y, and that will avoid the penalty taxes. And the third is foreign dividend withholding taxes. If in your TFSA account you have US stocks, and on the US stocks, if you are getting dividend, any foreign taxes withheld on that particular dividend, you cannot claim a credit for that. So foreign tax credit is not available either in RRSP or in TFSA account.
Do we need to pay tax on that or not?
No, you just need to forget that tax because TFSA is tax free, right? So you don't have to pay any tax in Canada. But if you have paid any taxes in US, you cannot claim a credit for that.
Oh, okay, got it.
Yeah. So now there is a small example. So again, Tina is back. So her contribution room is 11,000 for 2016. Then she has invested 10,000 on 10th of February. Then she has made a 2,000 withdrawal. Again 2,000 contribution. Again 3,500 contribution. So will she be attracted any penalty on that? Yes. Let's understand. So her limit is 11,000. Initially she invested 10,000. Fine, she is within contribution. Then she withdrew 2,000. So that does not make her net contribution 8,000 in TFSA. Her contribution is still 10,000 in TFSA. So on 10th of April, when she has invested additional 2,000, she has actually exceeded the limit by 1,000. So on 1,000, she has to pay penalty for 9 months, and on 3,500, she has to pay penalty for 6 months. Any question on this example?
There's no grace amount like RRSP?
No, there is no grace amount. No.
If she is gaining any profit, for example, only 10,000 during the contribution, rest of the we can just forget it. And if it is exceeding the limit, do we need to pay the tax or not?
Sorry, actually, I didn't get your question.
So during the first date, like 10th February, 10,000, just she made a contribution.
Correct.
And no all three withdrawal or nothing else, right? And during that 10,000 contribution, she gained the profit.
Correct.
On invested stock.
Correct.
For example, like 12,000.
Correct.
So does it go like exceeding their contribution or?
No. Any income generated in TFSA will not increase your contribution.
Okay.
Okay, so that's it from my side. So I think if you still have any questions, you can definitely ask.
Thank you, Pratik. I see that there are some questions.
Sure.
Ayaz has asked question. He has put in the chat. What will be the tax implication for RRSP and TSFA account in case I day trade but incur losses?
So it would be treated as a business loss in either of the account, and then you can set off against other income which you may have. So any income through day trading generated, any income or loss through day trading generated in RRSP or TFSA would be business income or loss, and you can set it off against other income as well. Does it answer questions?
Yeah, thanks. And I think you have covered already, but maybe for the sake of completion, I'll ask again here. Is it true that if you frequently trade with TFSA, then short earnings are not tax exempt? I think this was asked by Fasad in the group.
No, it will be treated as a business income, and you have to pay tax on the entire amount.
But the frequent trade, or you're saying a day trade?
Day trade.
Not the swing trade, right?
Yeah, again, I mean, you need to apply the criteria which we discussed in the previous slide. Like there are 6 factors which you need to take into account, and on that basis, CRA will take a call whether it is a day trade or whether it is a normal trade.
But how many transactions per week should be considered as day trade?
Pratik, Fasad's question is there any quantitative figure which can be a reference, or it all depends on the 6 factors that you mentioned?
So it all depends on 6 factors, and the situation changes from person to person. In my opinion, one of the criteria would be the income generated through stock trading versus your total income.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think most of the questions that were asked in the group you have covered.
And there is a short brief about myself. So basically, I'm a CPA Canada. I'm also done Chartered Accountant and Company Secretary from India. I landed 2 years back to Canada, and currently I'm working with RBC as a manager. So just a small disclaimer that I have made this presentation in my personal capacity, and it does not represent RBC in any manner. And also, if you would like to take any decision on the basis of this presentation, I would strongly advise you to consult your CPA or CRA before making any informed decision. And the purpose of this presentation was to create an awareness and to give understanding about the investment products and the tax structure in Canada. So that's it from my side. And I again thank you everyone for your time on this presentation.
So I think we need to thank you, Pratik, for your valuable time and providing us all.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Pratik.
Thank you, Pratik. Very nice presentation.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Excellent session, Pratik, and thank you, Kamal, for arranging it.
Also, even if in future you have any question or query, you can either reach out to me personally, you can ask in group as well. I will try to answer the question in the best possible manner.
For sure. I really thank you on behalf of members. This was a really informative and well-structured presentation. I really thank you, Pratik, for such an informative session and answering all the questions from the members over here. It was really helpful. Thanks for your knowledge sharing and this personal time that you have given to all of us. We really appreciate your time. Thank you so much. And request group members, please feel free to reach out to Pratik or use our group as a platform to ask any further questions if you have related to tax. And we would be happy to get your tax related questions answered through Pratik's help. And if Pratik is okay, we can share his, as Vivek sir had requested, his slide to the group. Pratik, you are okay with that?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure.
Thank you, Pratik.
Okay, thanks, Vivek. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day, great weekend. Bye.